2024 was a year. It was the last year, in fact. It was the one right before this one. I watch a lot of stuff every year, but last year was the first year that I started documenting every single thing I watched so that I could have a list of everything I watched in 2024. So I thought, hey, I should make a video of my top 10 things that I watched. I don't think anyone has ever done that before. I might be the first person to ever do this. I included in this list shows and movies that I watched last year, and I've also not limited it to things that came out last year. They didn't have to come out in 2024, they're just things that I watched in 2024. That being said, let's just jump into it. Vox Machina was the very last thing that I watched in 2024. In fact, I finished watching the last episode at 11:58 p.m. New Year's Eve because I was determined to start the year completely fresh, so I spent that night binging the last few episodes. I'd heard good things about the show ever since it came out, but I was never in any hurry to watch it because I didn't care about Dungeons and Dragons. But then, in 2023, late 2023, something happened. So with a newfound interest, I was ready to check this series out. I also wound up having a strange relationship with this series, because I started watching it at a very difficult time in my life. So on the days where I couldn't get myself out of bed, I'd throw the show on and just distract myself for a couple of hours. The story isn't anything mind-blowing. In fact, if it was just another show produced in typical fashion, it wouldn't be in my top 10. But what makes it so special is the circumstance around its existence. For those of you who don't know, this show is based off of the D&D adventures of this group of folks from a series called Critical Role. They took their adventures and directly adapted it to animation. The fact that these are stories that were acted out in real time amongst a group of role-playing friends, and all these moments happened more or less organically, that's what makes this show special. I started watching Critical Role after getting into Vox Machina, but because there's a lot of it, I haven't made it very far because I have the attention span of... that's a funny little... The other thing this show has going for it are the characters. All 7 of the main cast are so endearing and likable. Even the ones I didn't care for in the beginning and assumed I never would care about eventually grew on me because they became more and more fleshed out over time. Hell, this show accomplished the single most impressive thing a show can accomplish. It made me care about a straight couple. If you're looking for a fun fantasy adventure with engaging characters, check this out. Just don't get too attached or you'll end up with a lot of homework. Really good, 8 out of 10. The Expanse was something I started in the very first month of the year, in January. I'd heard about it through a YouTube channel I watch, and I thought I'd give it a go because I like sci-fi, and I've heard that this was good. And yeah, it was pretty damn good. It also has one of my new favorite fictional characters, Kamina Drummer, the woman you are. The world building is truly incredible. Live-action sci-fi that isn't Star Wars feels near impossible to pull off, especially if you're trying to make it feel unique and not just like Star Wars. But from the very first episode, you feel like you're stepping into a universe that is truly lived in. There are communities and cultures at play here. There's even a freedom fighters group that are seen as terrorists, and it's led by the ex of one of the main characters, and she's trying to escape from this abusive past relationship. Where have I heard that before? The show has a lot of magic to it. It's a grand spectacle and has a lot to get invested in, which makes the thing I'm about to say seem weird because it's going to sound more negative than I intend it to. But my one problem with the show is that with every season that passed, I felt increasingly disappointed. Not because each season got worse. In fact, I think season 5 was one of the better seasons, and there's 6 total. But the biggest thing drawing me into this series was always this mysterious sense of potential. A potential that I can't quite explain, but I could feel all throughout the show. Like, it was like I was waiting for the show to take this one last step into the extraordinary. and I feel like it never quite reached as far as it could have gone, and that might have been due to a litany of production issues that this show apparently faced behind the scenes, including getting canceled not once but twice. And it's a shame that it ended only after 6 seasons, because I have a feeling it could have gone much further. My favorite portion of the show was actually the very first arc, Season 1 and the first half of Season 2. I was so hooked on the story and characters, but I didn't realize that the show was so neatly divided into very specific and clear-cut arcs, that when the first arc ended, I was so bummed that the show wasn't just more of that. But don't worry, there was plenty more good arcs. That was just my favorite of the bunch. All that said, the show is a solid 8 out of 10 for me. At times, maybe an 8.5, but not every arc is as strong as the one before it and whatnot. But if you're looking for something new, definitely check this out. I guarantee there's something here for you to enjoy. It has gay people. So I am a big Star Wars fan, and I don't just mean I grew up on the movies and was never able to move past them and I hate everything new. I mean I am a fan of the movies and the current content for Star Wars. There has been so much great stuff for hardcore fans these past few years, so much stuff to enjoy. There's definitely no lack of content, and one of the great shows that have come out in recent years was The Bad Batch. This was a show that I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did, because I didn't give a single shit about The Bad Batch and Clone Wars, but wouldn't you know it, not only did they turn out to be great characters, the show was also essentially an epilogue to the Clone Wars, which is my single favorite Star Wars project. Having a whole show dedicated to seeing how different characters and groups ended up after the Clone Wars was something that made my little nerd brain just so damn happy. I loved Season 1, and while I didn't love Season 2 as much, I still enjoyed it, so I was excited for Season 3, which was the final season. And I ended up not being disappointed in the slightest. Every character arc was handled and wrapped up so nicely and satisfyingly, and there were a lot of surprising character returns and moments, and the show ended with a bang. The whole series, you have this sense of dread because you know these characters aren't around in the original trilogy era, so you're left worrying about their fates the entire time, and the payoff did not disappoint. No spoilers, but you have to give it a try if you haven't watched it yet and you're a fan of Star Wars. Or if you've never tried getting into Star Wars but you like science fantasy fiction, absolutely give Star Wars a go. There is so much content out there to enjoy, and we're still getting great new stuff to this day. It's one of the most creative franchises out there, in my opinion. Really good, 8.5 out of 10. This next entry at number 7 wasn't something that released last year, unlike the previous entries. In fact, it released almost 30 years ago, and that is I'd heard about this movie a lot throughout my couple decades of life, and I didn't know much about it aside from its general premise. Then when I watched WandaVision and heard people say that show was basically a Marvel Truman Show, I became even more interested because I really liked WandaVision. So finally, towards the end of last year, I gave it a watch. It was a truly amazing movie. If you don't know the premise, and this isn't spoilers, because I mean, this is revealed very, in the first few minutes of the movie. It's about a guy whose entire life has been simulated as part of a TV show. The whole world watches his day-to-day life on TV. And the movie starts where he begins to question the odd things going on that make him feel as though he's losing his mind, but slowly he unravels that his life isn't as real as he once believed. It's a great kind of a mind fuck of a movie, and it also makes you think about your own life in some ways. It's an older movie, but it was honestly ahead of its time. This concept feels so modern. I'd almost expect to watch an anime with this plot. But it came out in the 90s, and you don't feel the age because the movie is just so well done that it feels timeless. Jim Carrey also did a fantastic job in this movie. I'd only ever seen him in his comedic roles. I've never watched him in a serious drama role, and he crushed it. I don't think anyone could have played this particular character better than he did. It was perfect for him. Definitely watch this movie. You won't regret it. It's amazing. 9 out of 10. And speaking of movies that didn't come out last year, but I only just got around to watching, History is my favorite subject. I love history. I'm a history nerd, particularly the not-so-distant history, the more well-documented portions of modern history. So a movie like this is right up my alley. The only Christopher Nolan movie that I had seen before this was Interstellar, and this was shortly after it came out, so it was a long time ago, and that is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love Interstellar. But I'd never been one to subscribe to the whole watching a director's entire catalog because you like their movie trend until I saw Oppenheimer last year. This movie was so good that, combined with how much I loved Interstellar, I was convinced to watch all of Nolan's movies. I haven't made it through all of them. I've only watched the first few in his catalog. So far I've watched Memento, 10 out of 10, Insomnia, 9 out of 10, and The Prestige, 8 out of 10. The man doesn't miss. So far, even the weakest movie was great, and Memento is among one of my all-time favorites now. It's my favorite Christopher Nolan movie I've seen so far. That movie is so fucking good. Oppenheimer is no exception. It's a masterfully constructed film, and surprisingly artistic for a biopic. It's the longest movie I've ever watched, and yet I've never watched a movie that felt like it was moving faster in my entire life. Every scene was like 15 seconds long, and yet it felt perfectly paced. Nothing felt rushed or drawn out. The movie does a great job at slowly building up over the course of the 3-hour runtime until you're finally rewarded with Oppie just heimering all over the place. E equals MC squared. That must stand for excellent equals movie cool squared. 9 out of 10. We're in the top 5 now. These are the truly unbeatable pieces of fiction. The kind of quality entertainment that might even make you feel. The first season of Invincible was one of those once-in-a-blue-moon surprises that no one was expecting to be as good as it was. I loved the first season so much. The building tension over the course of those 8 episodes was truly unmatched, so naturally I was excited for season 2. Then they made the insane decision to split the season in half by months, despite the whole season being finished. With only 8 episodes per season, you do not have the luxury of doing that. Luckily, they have learned their lesson with season 3 this year, because everyone hated that shit, and it kind of killed the momentum of season 2. I didn't see very many people talking about it as it was happening. Lucky for me, I waited until both halves of the season were out before watching, and I was not disappointed. This show continues to be a banger. It's thrilling, exciting, nerve-wracking, and Mark is such a likable protagonist in such a uniquely special way that you're just so along for the ride wherever it takes you. The only thing that I don't like about this show is the animation. The art style is fine, but the way the characters move, especially during scenes with a lot of movement, drives me insane. It does not look very good. They can pretend it's an artistic choice, but I know better. They're cheap. But the story is so good that it shines through any lacking animation, and the vocal performances are among the best in all of animation. They do such a fantastic job. Amazing show, 9 out of 10. Speaking of surprises, of all things to come out this year, I was not expecting to love a show about the fucking Penguin. This might be a hot take, but I personally did not like The Batman, despite being a casual fan of the Batman universe. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's very well made, but it just wasn't for me. It felt kind of bland, like in terms of just story, so I didn't really give a shit about this Penguin series coming out when I heard that it was being made. But suddenly, I started hearing that this show was actually incredible and shocking everyone with how good it was, and I'm nothing if not a sheep. So finally, I sat down and watched it, and holy fuck. The writers were on God mode. Everything about this narrative is so tightly written and masterfully woven that I was gripped the whole way through. Sophia Falcone in particular was the standout character for me. Her story was incredibly engaging and was amplified by a stellar performance. Truly amazing. What makes this show even more impressive for me is that it managed to make me feel this strongly about it, despite not enjoying the Batman. I had no investment in this interpretation of the universe going into this series, and now I'm excited for the Batman sequel because I feel like me not liking the first one was just some kind of fluke. Suddenly I trust these writers with my life. There were a few scenes in the final few episodes of this season that had my jaw on the floor. If you were skeptical about watching this show, watch it. Even if you don't care about Batman as a franchise, you really don't need to. It's a solid standalone crime drama. Amazing show, 9.5 out of 10. I was penguining so hard the entire time. Every few years or so, a series comes along that kind of changes the game. The kind of show to make you think about life differently, a show that leaves a lasting impact on you. In 2024, that show was... Lately, I have honestly been pretty worn out when it comes to anime. I started feeling like every anime felt kind of the same. They all use the same tired anime tropes, including ones that drive me crazy, like sexual harassment equals funny. But when I heard people say Frieren was super good, I was intrigued. It didn't seem like your typical anime. It didn't seem to have all the tropes that I couldn't stand. And it all made sense when I learned that the Frieren manga was created by a female author. A much fresher perspective and a voice that wouldn't need to rely on, boobs moment. When I finally got around to watching it, the hype was entirely justified. This is the kind of show where you need to get it, like truly get it, in order to enjoy the show to its fullest. If you're not in the right mindset, you can easily miss what's so special about this show. Luckily, I got what the show was trying to do right from the first episode, but even still, it took me a few episodes to fully appreciate it. And once you do, every single episode feels like a treat. This is a show about how precious life is, about enjoying every moment that you have with the ones you love, about the magic of the world and our time in it. The characters are so lovable. Frieren and Fern are both two of my all-time favorite fictional characters now, which feels so weird to say about something so new, but their relationship is among the greats for me. I even love Stark, who I was convinced was going to be an archetype, blonde boy from Demon Slayer type character, but leave it to a woman to write a boy with some actual depth. If you want an uplifting, feel-good show to watch Frieren. It makes you smile and maybe cry if you're the type to cry. This show did manage to make me cry just once, but I very rarely cry, so that's quite the accomplishment on their part. 9.5 out of 10, they put crack in this show, I swear. Okay, let's stop dancing around it. We all knew this was coming at some point. Arcane Season 1 burned down my house, rescued my cat from a tree, killed my family, gave me $1 million, and then took the money back and ate it right in front of me. And then it gave me gay disease. Never before had a new arrival on the scene so immediately captured and devoured me. Arcane became one of my top 3 favorite shows of all time, and I consider the first season to be a genuinely perfect masterpiece. Not a single flaw. It's incredible. And while I don't think Season 2 is as perfect, a flawed season of Arcane is still better than most other shows' best season. This series continued to be an enthralling, emotional roller coaster from start to finish. The animation, incredible. The performances, incredible. The music, incredible. I'm bumping the soundtrack like it's Dami Mommy ASMR and I need it to sleep. What makes this season not as perfect as the first season isn't necessarily a writing flaw, but just a lack of time to fully flesh everything out. This show needed 3 seasons, but it's also expensive as fuck. So they were ready to move on. You could feel it. They were ready to finish this show. But the content of Season 2 was double the content of Season 1. If it had a 3rd season, it'd be perfect. Here is my idea of how this portion of the series should have gone. Major spoilers, so skip ahead to the end of this entry. I'll show the time on screen. Skip ahead to this time if you haven't watched Season 2. My proposal for Season 2 and how it should have gone is that the story of Act 1 would be spread across the first 2 acts. largely unchanged in terms of content, just taking time to explore everyone and everything at a slower pace like Season 1 did. Then Act 3 would be the time skip of what was originally Act 2, except not including Episode 6. It would be Episodes 4 and 5 spread out across the last 3 episodes, focusing more on Piltover's occupation of Zahn and Vi's time in the pits. Then the last episode, the finale, would be Vi and Jinx pairing up to find Vander in the tunnels, and the season ends at the end of Episode 5 with the Jace cliffhanger. Season 1 ends with the tragic loss of a father figure. Season 2 ends with the return of one. Season 1 ends with the splitting of these two sisters. Season 2 ends with them being brought back together by the very man whose quote-unquote death broke them apart to begin with. Then Season 3 starts, and the first act is comprised entirely of the events of Episode 6. Maybe they don't reach Victor's compound until the second episode, but we get a lot more of the peaceful downtime, and also more time focusing on Vi and Jinx's relationship, and Caitlyn and Mbessa's relationship. Then Act 1 ends in tragedy, just like it did with the first season. Act 2 focuses on Echo and Jace's time on drugs, and we spend a lot more time fleshing out Mel's powers and her connection to the Black Rose. And instead of having only 2 episodes to wrap up Vi and Jinx's arc, we have 2 whole acts to give these characters the amount of time they truly deserve. That's how I personally think it should have gone, but all of that yapping being said, the rushed nature of Season 2 doesn't change the quality of the content itself, and the presentation was incredible as always. Fortiche is a god amongst men, and man, does it blow me away that a show this amazing could even exist, especially in my lifetime. 9.5 out of 10. Let's go over some honorable mentions before stepping into the first pick. Gen V. This is a spin-off of The Boys. The Boys is a show I go back and forth between really liking and really not liking. I really enjoyed the first 2 seasons, and then ever since I've been kind of losing my love for the series. It focuses a little too much on being gross and not enough on like actual engaging story for my liking. But I stepped into Gen V with low expectations, and I ended up loving it. I loved the first season of Gen V more than any season of The Boys. It's a truly, actually great show and great characters. Love the crew dynamic, and it has a gender-fluid character whose superpower is switching genders. I mean, come on. Love, Death, and Robots was an older anthology series on Netflix that I totally missed the boat when it first came out, but my girlfriend at the time showed it to me last year, and it's great. There's some highs and lows for sure, but the highs are really high. The first season has a lot of like sexual episodes for some reason, a lot of nudity, but there's still some great episodes in that first season, and seasons 2 and 3 are really what drew me in. They had some great concepts. Check out this series if you want some short stories that are actually really engaging. I watched the Deadpool movies for the first time last year. I never really had any interest in Deadpool, so I just hadn't gotten around to it. And they're actually all really good. I'm as fun as Deadpool and Wolverine was, which is the movie that came out last year. I think my favorite of the 3 was actually Deadpool 2. But they were all really fun movies and actually pretty entertaining for how mainstream Deadpool has become. It wasn't a disappointment. Pearl was a movie I watched with my friends as we were watching the trilogy that it comes from. But Pearl is pretty much a standalone movie. It's a horror movie, but it's more of a psychological thriller than anything. There's still plenty of gore and freaky moments, but it's more psychological in terms of the context and the presentation. And this is just a really solid movie. The story is simple but engaging, and the building tension is palpable. The performance by Mia Goth is truly incredible, and if you're looking for a movie to give you the heebie-jeebies, this is a good pick. Bottoms is for the gays, and it is hilarious. This is a really funny movie. It's about a pair of lesbians in high school who form a fight club just so they can start hanging out with cute girls, and it is a hilarious movie. Even if you're not like in the LGBTQ plus community, there's still plenty to be enjoyed here. It's just a really funny movie. If you're looking for a laugh out loud comedy, check it out. You won't regret it. Spy X Family was another anime I watched last year that surprised me, and one that I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did. It feels very reminiscent of a Saturday morning cartoon to me. It's the kind of show you could turn on and just kind of lose yourself in the funnies and the lighthearted entertainment. It's nothing too serious. There's not a major overarching plot. You get the basic concept, you get the basic goal of the characters, and then every episode is some new goofy situation. It's a good time. It's a pretty feel-good show. And here we are. The number one show is a show that changed my life. It was the very first thing I watched in 2024, the very first thing I watched in January of 2024, and it remained in the top spot the entire year because it was about more than just being a good show. It was about the impact that it left on me, and that show was Bojack Horseman is deceptive. It lulls you into thinking it's a typical adult animated comedy show with raunchy humor and simplistic animation, but just like the character of Bojack himself, there's a lot more under the surface than what first appears. It was recommended to me by a friend, and I had already planned on watching it someday, but decided to watch it right away after hearing from her about how good it was, and I don't think I could have watched it at a better time or a better year. Bojack is a show about depression. It's a show about relationships. It's a show about karma. It's a show about accountability. It's a show about forgiveness. It's a show about being unforgivable. It's about whatever it is that you take away, because it is a show that makes you look inward for answers. How you respond to the uncomfortableness of the show is a pretty good look at how you are as a person. Bojack forever altered the way that I look at life. It tells you that you aren't alone in the way that you feel, but it also shows you harsher realities. The show is about a guy who is a truly terrible person. Nearly everything bad that happens to him is brought upon himself, and the show makes the claim that you are more than your worst behaviors, but it doesn't bullshit you into believing that makes anything shitty you do excusable. It's never too late to change, but it is too late to take back what you've already done. Nobody owes you anything. The work you put into bettering yourself does not automatically elicit forgiveness. You have to want to change for yourself before anybody else. And when thinking about your flaws, you can blame your upbringing, you can blame your environment, your circumstances, your bad influences, but no one can fix you but you. It may never be too late to change, but you won't change unless you do the work yourself. This show also has the single most emotionally impactful episode of television I have ever witnessed. A haunting anti-suicide message that I think is genuinely a major factor in why I'm still here now. A show like this is one in a million. It can't be replicated, and you can't go back to the person you were before watching it. Once it holds the mirror up to you, you can't unsee what you see. But will you act on what you see, or will you ignore it until it is too late? Bojack Horseman is a perfect 10 out of 10. Watch it to change your life. Thank you everybody for watching. This video was a very new experience for me, but I hope you enjoyed it. If the response is good, I'll definitely make more videos like this, and maybe I'll do the same thing next year. But I had a lot of fun doing this, so thank you again. But for now, I'll see you around. Bye-bye.